welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Sandy Portillo Robbins, and I will be your worship associate today. No matter who you are or how you make your living, no matter whom you love or how you experience the sacred, we hope you will feel welcome here among us. Everyone is invited to stay after the service and make your way across the atrium into the other room for lunch, for a light lunch and conversation. If there is something on your heart that you would like lifted up in our service, there is a memory book at the back of the sanctuary where you can write a joy or sorrow that will be read aloud. You are always welcome to simply light a candle for a silent memory or prayer. As we gather, we remind ourselves that our church occupies land in Huchiyun, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. May we have the humility and courage to do our part to restore what has been broken and the wisdom to live into a new solidarity with Indigenous communities and the earth. Now, for the summer, we don't have our typical programs for children and youth. Kids are welcome to stay in the service, and childcare is available. Today, we welcome to our pulpit Era Capone, she, they. Era is the soon-to-be former Director of Religious Education at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Santa Rosa, a role they have filled for 5 years with their Sonoma County congregation. With the background in developmental psychology, early childhood education, and Magic, the Gathering, Era has brought play-based learning, developmental awareness, and gamification to their educational and spiritual milieu, which is likely best represented by their insistence on using Dungeons and Dragons as a form of religious education. As a trans person and OWL educator, Era has found joy in participating in a spiritual community that affirms queer experiences and has proudly helped radicalize dozens of young people into embracing empathy and practicing love for themselves and others. Now, I invite you to rise in body or spirit and first offer a greeting to some of those joining online, and then offer a greeting to one another before we sing our opening hymn, Immortal Love, number 10 in the gray hymnal.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Capone, and I will be providing today's sermon, as well as reading our chalice lighting words for today. Sandy, will you please come up and light our chalice? Let us kindle our chalice flame with these timeless words, The Road Not Taken, by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then look the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden back. Oh, I kept the first another day, yet knowing how way leads to on to way, I doubted if I ever should come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Sorry. Now the mic's on.
Good morning again. As many of you know, I was a middle school math teacher for over 10 years, and I'm a mother of 2 daughters. Now, as adults, we often think of ourselves as the children's teachers or mentors. But do we ever stop to think of ourselves as the student, the one who is learning from them? I know I certainly had much to learn as a parent. Apparently, babies haven't read the parenting books that say they are only hungry every 3 hours, and that the best sleep schedule would be in the evening when everyone else is sleeping. I was the one who had to learn to adjust my schedule and learn from their cues what it was they needed. Well, when I started my career as a middle school math teacher in 2013, I thought, well, I know it's a difficult age, but I have creative ways to teach them math, and it will be fun for them. Little did I know how much they were going to open up my mathematical thinking. I had just taken an online course on teaching math, and it was a very different approach than how I'd been taught math. It was about letting students make mistakes and then letting them come to a solution in their own way. It didn't matter if I knew a simpler solution. And it went something like this. I'd put a picture of a pattern up, like the one that's up there, and I'd ask them, how they saw the pattern growing and how many dots would be in the next step. Then I would ask them, how many dots in step 43? So one logical way to solve this would be to just multiply the dots in step 1 by 43. But since this pattern isn't proportional, it wouldn't work to do that. So eventually this would get them thinking what's proportional versus what's linear without necessarily using that terminology. But now the pattern I have up there is fairly simple, and they got more complicated as the year went on. The kids could get pretty creative, and they certainly opened up my mind and my perspective when I would see a picture. And I'm going to give you an example. Now, mind you, when I do these lessons, they're usually very interactive. The students are the ones who come up and try to explain the pattern. So I'm going to try to show you what it would look like for a student showing me what they do. So if you could put the next slide up, please. Okay. So hopefully you can see this. Here you can see kind of their way of thinking. They saw columns of threes. So these were single columns. And then they saw red dot growing at the top, one red dot with each new step. So the number of red dots corresponded to the step number. And the same with the purple dots. It grew by one step each time. So the number of purple dots corresponded to the step number. And I tried to show it here in this equation. Then the number of columns, there was one more column than the step number. So it was, if in step 1, there was one column plus 1, and 3 dots in each column. So you multiply 3 by the number of columns. So in step 3, you have 3 plus 1 column, so 4 columns, times 3 dots each. And that's how they got to their solution. Then I would ask them, what about step 43? Now, they certainly don't want to draw up to step 43, but they have kind of a rule they can use. So if you could show the next slide, please. So here it is, 43 red dots, 43 purple dots, 43 plus 1 column times 3 equals 218 dots. So that's kind of their rule. Now, of course, it would take a few days and times to get to something this clear. But now, when I would look at the picture, I just went straight to kind of algebraic thinking. What's the simplest way? So if you could show the next slide. So here's this was my interpretation. You have a box, and it keeps adding 5 dots, for the 3 sides of the box, and the left side of the box is just a constant 3. So my equation would have been 5x plus 3. To show them, though, I kind of didn't use x's here. I used step number 1, 5 dots. Step number 2, 2 times 5. Step number 3, 3 times 5. But it was just, I don't think it was quite as creative as the students were doing it. Anyway, so again, it gives you the same answer. And usually I would have 3 or 4 different ways of seeing the pattern, and we would have them all up there. We would put their names up there. So it was just great. Everybody learned from each other. So I hope that was kind of clear. Anyway, so they, as you can see, they were creative. They made mistakes, but their mistakes and solutions it really helped everybody learn. Sometimes there was that student that you typically think was bad at math who came up with the most creative solutions. And I don't have an example here for you, but just trust me, because their thinking was a little different, they could do something really beautiful. So I learned that in the classroom, while I was the adult, We were really all students and teachers. I hope my students learned that there are many ways to do math, and their efforts are not wrong. They're just steps along the way to finding a solution. Math really is a creative endeavor.
I would like to now invite you all to our time for centering. These words come today from Oathbringer, a fantasy novel written by the prolific author Brandon Sanderson. I came across this quote during my summer reading / escapism, and these words stuck with me. I hope they resonate with you as well. The most important words a person can say are, "I will do better." These are not the most important words any person can say. I am a person, and yet they are what I needed to say. Journey before destination. Some may call it a simple platitude, but it is far more. A journey will have pain and failure. It is not only the steps forward that we must accept. It is the stumbles, the trials, the knowledge that we will fail, that we will hurt those around us. But if we stop, if we accept the person we are when we fall, the journey ends. That failure becomes our destination. To love the journey is to accept no such end. I have found, through painful experience, that the most important step a person can take is always the next one.
In this community of care and witness, we hold one another in the seasons of our lives. We acknowledge the joys and the pains that weave our lives together. Please hold all affected by the Texas floods in loving thoughts. Somebody else writes, keeping my daughter's partner in my thoughts as he goes in for repeat surgery on Tuesday. May all go well. And somebody else wrote, keeping Paul in our thoughts, just diagnosed with cancer. So for all these that have been spoken aloud, and all that yet remains in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, may we know that what is held by each of us here is held in the larger, loving embrace of our community and by a greater love that holds us all. Please remain seated to join in singing, Life Has Loveliness to Sell, number 329 in the gray hymnal.
Life has loveliness to sell, all beautiful and splendid things. Blue waves whitened on a cliff, soaring fire that sways and sings, and children's faces looking up, holding wonder like a cup. Life has loveliness to sell, as music like a curve of gold, scent of pine trees in the rain, eyes that love you, arms that hold, and for your spirit still delight, holy thoughts that star the night. Spend all you have for loveliness, to buy and never count the cost. For one singing hour of peace, count a year of strife and loss, and for a breath of ecstasy, give all you have been or could be.
I really don't feel like I should be here right now. I am not a minister. I am a director of religious education, a job that I stumbled into after being a preschool teacher who was picking up Sunday childcare work at the UU Church in Santa Rosa. I am not a member of this church that I've worked for 5 years, nor do I identify as a Unitarian Universalist or even as particularly religious or spiritual at all, an identity that is at odds with my current occupation. However, Reverend Marcus invited me to come here to speak to all of you today, to share a sermon. He and I have attended several retreats together on the future of youth and young adult ministry, and I think he may have interpreted my lack of patience and antagonistic questioning as some sort of wisdom. He's very kind in that way. But I did say yes to him, and I think that if I am being completely honest, I said yes out of my own self-interest. There's something that I find myself in conflict with in this faith that I have become entangled in. And what better way to sort it all out than here with all of you? There's actually probably a lot of better ways. Journaling, meditation, therapy. But today's not about doing things in a right way or even in a better way. It's about doing things the wrong way. But don't worry, this isn't just about me doing things the wrong way. I have plenty of other people to talk about who are messing up royally. So I'll begin with my students. Last November, I brought a group of teenagers to service here at UUCB. The trip was the first of several for our Neighboring Faiths program. Our teenagers learned about and visited a variety of different spiritual communities as a means to expand their understanding of what faith can look like and to help guide them in creating their own statements of religious identity at the end of the year. The Sunday we chose to visit was the one following the presidential election, and it was a deeply moving service for me. Reverend Marcus spoke on what we can do when we feel our faith being shaken, when we lose faith in the things we invested so much of ourselves into. One of the recurring themes was that of doing the next right thing. For me, Reverend Marcus's words resonated deeply and touched on something I really needed to hear in a moment of frustration and fear. And then I talked to the 8 teenagers who I had brought to the service. When asked what stood out to them from the service, I was met with a resounding response of they sang a song from Frozen 2. When pressed about what they might like to incorporate into our services up in Santa Rosa, they said more Disney songs. One teen, when pressed on what he thought about the service, said, and I quote, "Honestly, I don't remember. I wasn't really paying attention, but I did like the music." But 7 months later, when they reflected on their visit to UUCB in our sanctuary in front of dozens of members of our congregation, they said that they liked the song from Frozen 2. They didn't even remember which song it was. To any of you who have teenagers or who work with teenagers, I do not need to tell you how difficult it can be to get them to engage with earnest, vulnerable conversations. Often we do our best to expose them to profound lessons, literature, artwork, performances, in the hopes that something sticks or they absorb some deeper message through osmosis. But in my case, as the director of religious education, I feel obligated to make sure that my students engage with spiritual ideas and concepts in a way that's more than recognizing songs from a movie, because the way they were engaging with spirituality in that moment, it wasn't the right way, it was the wrong way. They weren't attending services at Santa Rosa, they weren't participating with the congregation as a whole, and opportunities for deep discussion always devolved into talking about video games and memes. The part that was exceptionally frustrating to me was that this wasn't some class. They weren't being graded, and I didn't even care if they could remember a single fact about religion. My goal for these kids was to find some connection to the spiritual, to find a sense of awe and wonder at the universe, to hold space for questions with unknowable answers, to feel like they were part of something bigger than the individual. Certainly, there was a way to get them to engage with spirituality. We just had to figure out what it was. So, over the next few months, following our visit to you all here in Berkeley, the teens learned about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism. They attended services of these traditions, met with worship leaders, and reflected on the parts they resonated with. The persistence and exposure began to pay off, and the kids began to discuss these topics of spirituality more freely. They felt moved by music and rituals. They experienced connection with those they were attending worship with, and valued the wisdom that was shared by the worship leaders. However, as the end of the year approached, the teens' resonance with these experiences seemed to lose the impact we had hoped it would hold. As my co-teacher and I urged them to reflect on their spiritual and religious identities, we were continuously met with the response of, Oh. They remarked on how they enjoyed some aspects of other faiths and were particular fans of the fourth UU principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning because they could believe whatever they wanted. In fact, the religion that had the most interest in them was Pastafarianism, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. As their DRE, I became more and more certain that I was doing something wrong. My job is to help these kids discover a deeper, fuller understanding of faith, but instead they were becoming indifferent to the very idea of religion, of even Unitarian Universalism. And the more the teens articulated their beliefs or lack thereof, the more I worried that my own beliefs were at fault for guiding these kids away from seeking a sense of spirituality. But why even care about encouraging these young people to participate in a spiritual journey in the first place? The profound answer is because, as Unitarian Universalists, believe that spirituality and being a part of a faith community makes one's life better and more fulfilled. The cynical response is that we want young UUs to grow into adult UUs, and the journey to them becoming future members involve these young people seeing the value in spiritual community and connection. Regardless of perspective, it is certainly in the best interest of UUs to bring young adults into the faith. One of the metaphors we use when discussing the transition from youth to adulthood in Unitarian Universalism is the cliff and the bridge. The cliff describes where children are left when they turn 18, suddenly unable to participate in the programs and activities for young people within the church. In the past, it was assumed that these burgeoning adults would simply enter into the adult part of UU life, attending services, joining committees, and participating in the congregation as full grown-ups. However, we discovered that we were losing young adults, and many young UUs would stop being engaged in their local congregations when they graduated high school. So the idea of the bridge was created to bring young UUs into UU adulthood with ministry, program, and support geared towards them. The image that the UUA website uses for the bridge shows a young person standing at the top of a cliff and an arrow representing the bridge pointing all the way down to the bottom where adult UU life resides. It's an interesting graphic. But graphics aside, this all makes sense, that young adults are leaving Unitarian Universalism, and it is up to us to hold on to them, to make sure they remain a part of the faith. However, I've never been a big fan of how this is framed. That image of the cliff and the bridge implies that one cannot be an adult and engage with this faith in the same way that they did when they were a child, that there is a prescribed way to be an adult Unitarian Universalist. A young person may not understand it, they may stray from the path, and so it is our duty to set them back on the right track, to push them towards the goal of becoming members who attend Sunday services, who participate in committees, and become what we envision grown-ups to be. And I see this image and think of my students who do not want to attend services, who are uncertain of wearing the UU label. I fear that the bridge is one that they will not cross, that the destination is one they will not call home. But shouldn't a faith as big and as welcoming and as loving as this one have a way to embrace those experiences too? To allow divergent journeys to still be a part of this spirituality, journeys that look vastly different than the ones we're used to? This sermon, although I didn't realize it until I was working on the final draft, is in part a response to the sermon that Reverend Marcus gave last fall, the Sunday after the election. The words that he spoke that gave me hope when I was craving it were to do the next right thing. Even today, I think of how helpful those words were and continue to be in the face of so much awfulness. At the same time, as I hold these words, I cannot help but think of this faith that has accepted me and invited me in, that has given me the opportunity to guide young people and foster their spiritual development. the faith that I do not identify with, but still love. There is conflict there, and it comes from one word: right. It is wonderful to do the right thing. It is a blessing to make things better and to improve and to do good in the world, but we will not always do the right thing. A journey will have pain and failure. It is not only the steps forward that we must accept. It is the stumbles, the trials, the knowledge that we will fail, that we will hurt those around us. As liberals, as progressives, as leftists, as UUs, we can often become fixated on being right, on doing the right thing, on guiding others down the right path. But the right thing is ephemeral and capricious. It rarely makes itself known, nor can we ever grasp its true nature. So when we fail to find the right thing, instead, we do nothing. Nothing. Nothing is better than the wrong thing, right? I would like to read to you now a passage from one of my students' statements on religious identity. One of the students who I was worried was approaching the Neighboring Faiths program wrong, who I was poorly preparing to follow the bridge from adulthood to childhood, or childhood to adulthood. This is from Wilhelmina Wilmarth. When asked about my religion, I always gave a different response. I'm an atheist. I don't have a religion. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. The inconsistency was almost painful. In middle school, some people seemed to suddenly have an awareness that they existed in this world, leading people to making their own identities. Gender, sexuality, religion, personality type, Hogwarts house, I'm a Ravenclaw. As I navigated through all of these and continue to, one still stood out, puzzling me. The definitely simple and not all complex frenemy of mine, religion. I always got uncomfortable thinking about it. And if I'm being honest, a little bit jealous. I watched my friends have bat mitzvahs, listened to their religious awakenings, encounters with God that they had experienced while they slept. I wanted that. I remember visiting the old degrading missions in Central California not too long ago. I recall stepping into the church, awestruck as I stared up at the high ceilings. I can still smell the cool scent of dust, stone, and age. A slight draft blew in from the warm outside, quickly turning into an almost frozen breeze inside the cold, dark room as it twined around my feet. I felt a sense I'd never really felt before, an eerie, mesmerizing chill. Looking up at that piercing stare from the Virgin Mary cascade, cradling young Jesus from a shelf, I felt unsettled. I briskly walked out to examine the tool used for grinding wheat. Yet that experience has stuck with me. I wish I knew why. When I first learned that I would have to present a statement of religious identity, surprisingly, I felt just a slight bit panicked. I had spent 13 years not knowing my religion, and now I had to figure it out in 8 months. Oh well, I thought, the school year's just begun. I've got ages. Well, here I am now at the end of my 7th grade year. It went a little faster than I had accounted for, it turns out. And I found that sometimes it can be easier to know what you aren't, rather than what you are. So here's what I'm not. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a blind believer. And I'm not someone who believes that your life is already written out for you the day you are born. I've realized that instead of this day marking a stopping point in childhood and uncertainty to religion, it's a beginning much, much more than I can never know at this moment. But that's okay. I'm ready for it. To love the journey is to accept no end. The most important step a person can take is always the next one. The next step does not need to be right or wrong. It must simply be another step. For the act of choosing in and of itself is righteous. And sometimes it is taking steps down the wrong way that are the most important. I started this sermon off by saying I should not be here, that I am using this time with all of you as an excuse to work out my own issues with Unitarian Universalism. That is still true. But is my gripe with this faith really that it tries to guide us in the right direction? Surely that message of the sermon can't be so apparently contrarian. No, I don't think that this is what all this amounts to. Journey before destination. If we stop, the journey ends. It is tempting to want a journey to end. It is comforting, it is safe. It becomes easier to tell others to follow in your footsteps because you know where they'll end up. The reason I find friction with Unitarian Universalism, that my students do not experience spirituality in the same way their parents and elders do, is because their faith is so often treated as a destination. We try to bridge young people into being adult UUs. We curate a journey. We hold expectations for how they will find spirituality. When we do it wrong, we are guided back to the correct path, or perhaps abandon it altogether. Right now, there are hundreds of young Unitarian Universalists who are seeking spiritual community. They are young people of YRUUP, children of lifelong members, teenagers about to face the cliff who will be met with a one-way bridge. These young adults, many of them, will not do the right things the right way. Many have no interest in Sunday service or experiencing their faith in ways that those who came before them have. They will do it wrong, and in doing so, will carve out their own beautiful, complicated, imperfect meaning in a world that defies understanding. So, what do we do? I do not know for certain, but I have some thoughts that might qualify as answers. Perhaps they're not the right answers for you, as they are wound up in my own complicated and individual experience with this faith, a congregation in Santa Rosa struggling with keeping its young people, and those who are desperately wanting to make a home for them. But here's what I can say. Do not wait for young people at the faith we hope their journey takes them. Do not give them directions from afar, guiding them towards a place that they do not feel ownership of. Instead, start that journey once more. Pack up your bags, bring the essentials, and leave some things behind. Join these young people on the road, knowing full well that they will take wrong turns, that they will fall, and that by joining them, we will share in those stumbles. But in those wrong turns, we will take new roads and we will trade some of our supplies for new ones. Embrace your journey and the journey of others, and perhaps instead of building bridges to the right destination, walk next to those who are most in need of companions. May you fall so you get up again. May you travel in good company. And may what you do next, be it right or wrong, not be your destination. May it be so.
are blessed with such amazing music here. My name is Helen. I'm one of your board members, and in our covenantal community, we share the responsibility for pursuing our mission by giving generously of our time, talent, and treasure. I invite you to support the work of our church by giving electronically, by scanning the QR code on the back of your badge, or by putting a cash or check donation into the donation envelope that you'll find in the back of the pew in front of you, and then put it into the donation box beside the fountain in the atrium as you leave the service. Each week, half of our offering is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization. The Good Neighbor for this month is the Berkeley Food Pantry. The mission of the Berkeley Food Pantry is to provide families, especially those with children, with adequate sustenance and nutrition at times when bills for food, rent, health care, and other items overwhelm them. Will you join me in rededicating ourselves to our mission? We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
Hola, buenos días. My name is Charis Amador. It's been really good being here today and seeing you. It's been a little while since I've seen you all. I want to remind you to check our website, uucb.org, to explore all the things that are available in our congregation. On the homepage in the News tab, you'll find a link to our weekly email newsletter, The Week Ahead, which includes a list of activities, announcements, and contact information. I want to highlight the following for the upcoming weeks. Next Sunday will be the fourth and final installment of this year's Summer Forum by the World Peace Committee, Our Moral Choices in the New Nuclear Age. On July 27th, we'll host our monthly potluck lunch. We invite you to bring a dish to share it after the service. Tomorrow starts our ukulele summer camp. If you'd like to participate, you might find more information on our website. And be sure to register for Chalice Camp happening August 4th through the 8th. It is open to grades 1 through 6 for campers, middle school age for counselors in training, and high school age for counselors. Now please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing song. Thank you. Gracias.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faith a quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why. In our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high, spirits joining as we fly, to touch the earth, to reach the sky.
Our closing words today are Changes Abound by Reverend Michelle Collins, the former interim minister here of this very church. Changes abound around us, within us, between us, in our communities, our neighborhoods, and our beloved faith communities. Changes abound. May we each find the balance point we need as we move through our ever-changing world, the balance between the old and the new, between the known and the unknown, between the familiar and the perhaps bold and risky possibilities through our ever-changing that may be there waiting.